Yep. Good morning. So today we're gonna carry on and put into practice what we went over yesterday. So basically just starting to sculpt something. So all this just to say that we're gonna divide the sculpt into three main stages. So sort of start getting used to how to approach a conceptual sculpt. So I'll be doing some sort of bust humanoid type thing. So in the primary stage, what we'll be doing is establishing the silhouette of the silhouette, the sort of main design, spending time on that. And then secondary stage is just sort of starting to refine a little bit more. And then the tertiary stage is more about adding details such as pores and wrinkles and things like that. Whether or not typically when you're working in Dynamesh, you don't really need to take it so far to the tertiary stage before you actually would retopologize, make UVs, and then you'd rather, well, we'll look into that, but you don't really make use of the Dynamesh for the tertiary stage because the Dynamesh is all about being able to update the polys, like you can make large changes and then update the polys. You don't really need that for the tertiary details. So you don't really need the Dynamesh for it. And you're better off actually, in my opinion, not opting for Dynamesh for the tertiary details. But anyways, so were there any questions before we get started? What is a bust? Yeah, good question. So bust. This is a bust. So it's nice defining sort of a type of character, creature, rather than fleshing out an entire body. You can start out with a bust. Nice. Yep. Okay. So for your assignment, you will hand in 3 conceptual busts. Okay. Other questions? I'm sorry? The due date for the bust is very soon. You have a week. Yeah, so I'm not giving you a lot of time on that first assignment because these are quick, rough sculpts. Other questions? Okay, let's get started. So first off, I'm going to do what I usually do. So I'm going to turn down the range. I'm going to Control N, make a new document. If I click the comma key to access the light box, I can go to the project tab, and we have some Dynamesh spheres here. So there's a Dynamesh 16, all these. That's okay. So let's just select one of those. Okay, fine. We'll open it. Some of these are oriented the wrong way, which is interesting. I don't know why they did that. But you see the the z-axis is actually that way, so the front of this would be here. Does that matter? Yes, it matters, because we're going to be going back and forth between different softwares. We want to have this aligned correctly. So anyways, if you have the grid active, that C should be pointing forward. But that's okay. So, like I said yesterday, under the tool palette, and if you go under geometry, there's a Dynamesh feature, and we can see that it's enabled. So this is nothing other than a sphere, polygonal sphere, It's opened in a project, the background is set to gray, and they've enabled Dynamesh. And then they made a project for it, and they named it Dynamesh 28. Okay, it's not the only way to make a Dynamesh. You can make a Dynamesh out of anything. So any mesh, you can import it from Maya if you wanted to, or just make a whatever primitive, turn on the Dynamesh feature. So Shift F, I can view the wireframe. So if I press Control and drag to the side, it will recompute the Dynamesh. It will update the polys on the fly. So now there's not much to update, but if I go BMV, for instance, and I go to my move brush and I do this, you can see that, okay, so now the polys are stretched, and then I hold Control and I do this to the side and it will recompute. So then I can keep sculpting. So that's the whole point. So this is set to some red color. If I don't want that, I can go down here. All right, so yeah, so let's just start fleshing this out. So what I will be using, BCB, clay buildup. This is a beautiful brush. So it will feel like you're adding or subtracting volume. So if I just press my pen down using the clay buildup, it really feels like I'm adding volume. But I'm not adding, technically I'm not adding polygons. All it's doing is pushing around the existing polys. But it really works in a way that it feels like you're adding lumps of clay. And every now and then I'll recompute, and that's just because some of these polys might start become stretched, right? So who knows what I'm building? We'll see. This is just fleshing out some ideas. So this is like drawing in 3D. So then BMV, I can go to the move brush. So with the move brush, it works very differently. I can move things around. The move brush is also dependent on your CAd intensity. So it also depends on how strong this is set. If it's set to a high number, it will be more sort of aggressive. If you lower the C intensity, you can make more fine adjustments. So I like having this sometimes in the middle and then just nudging away. So the way to approach this or sculpting in general is just, you don't really know what you're doing. You know, each change is not very well thought out. You're just trying things, and there's a very iterative, gradual thing, nudging things around. So I think you have to loosen up a little bit. Don't be, maybe listen to some music. I do that sometimes. Whatever you need to do, get in the flow. Just try things. Don't be afraid to try things. Anatomy, should we? Okay, no. So we'll make use of some anatomy reference, but for this, I'm just gonna not get bothered too much with that. So all I'm doing here, clay buildup, and I'm toggling around the character a lot, observing it at a lot of different angles. Sometimes also what's helpful, if you press V, that's actually to change the colors. So now it's using the secondary color. So pressing V is a hotkey to change between the primary and the secondary color. So since there's no RGB values assigned to this, there's no poly paint assigned to the mesh, it will alter the color. So then I can really have a very clear read of where my silhouette, what it's looking like. So the silhouette is very, very important in any sort of character, creature design, or any design. So in this primary stage, a lot is about establishing that. That's interesting. So let's do something. Oh, so see, that just happened. I talked about yesterday. Shift S, you will drop it down to the canvas, and it looks like a bug. But all you need to do is Control N, and then that goes away. So I don't want to make this too human. I think just have something more crazy, like. Whoops. So there, I just smoothed everything out. I pressed Shift. Okay, so all right, so I'm nudging away, and then I can drag out entirely new portions of this. So in the move brush, I can just drag down this neck. And again, that Shift F, you'll see that again. Go like that, recompute, and then off I go. So let's just actually briefly, if you search, you know, like bust anatomy, or if you have some anatomy books handy, but or upper body anatomy or whatever. Let's see. Uh, let's just quickly. So maybe this one. Okay. So especially the superficial musculature, it's worth noticing like where do the muscles start, where do they end up, and in what matter, and like how do they look? Instead of just always opting for, well, I'm just going to do a cartoony character. So for me, I'm just going to have a neck that looks like a tube. Well, chances are your designs, even if it's something conceptual or cartoony or whatever it is that you're making, if you're basing it in human anatomy, your design is going to be stronger. So anatomy is a huge part of creature design. And so what I would suggest you do is just don't be afraid to Google anatomy reference and just have a look. You know, so for instance, now I'm fleshing out the neck area. What's okay? So I can see this funny muscle here, sternocleidomastoid. So when you're talking with other artists or art directors, we will actually use these names because why not? The Latin names because it's easier to communicate rather than saying, oh, you know, this muscle here, you gotta change that a little bit. You know, that strange one. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it becomes difficult. So just there's a few of these that are more important than others. So we can see the sternocleidomastoid here and the trapezius in the back. That's sort of what makes out the contours of the neck. So if I now I know that. So it's not just a trunk coming down, but we actually have the sternocleidomastoid. It starts up here, behind, sort of tucked in behind the ear, then it goes down, crosses over in the front. So I can start roughing in this basic musculature. And then what did I have in the back? I had the trapezius, and it goes down here. So we have the upper trapezius and the lower trapezius. So maybe if I go and find a back, let's see. I should have prepared some references, but a little lazy. So here, this is the trapezius here, upper, mid, and lower. So it's a very large set of muscles. So that's sort of what you're seeing when you're looking in front at the bust, because it makes out the contours. So then I can update the Dynamesh. So I'm making the upper trapezius and then just fleshing that in. So, and then I'll go to the front. You see, that's sort of what makes up the anatomy there. Okay, so let's start keep fleshing this out. Whoop. And now we already have sort of the beginnings of something. So working pretty rough, smoothing things down. I'm using, so far I've used clay buildup and move. So two tools. And I also like the Damian standard, so BDS, that's the Damian standard, DAM standard. It will slash into the mesh. So I like this for accentuating details or accentuating forms, so that I've started building a form here and then I'm accentuating it. So it will just slash into it like that. There's also the slash 3 a lot of people like. So BS3 slash 3, that is very similar. So remember what we said yesterday, these are just like pre-made brush sets that are, they're made from the standard brush by a selection using alphas, using certain stroke settings. And you could also build your own custom brushes if you want. And so, yeah, so here we have the nasolabial fold. So even though this is sort of like a, I don't even know what this is, I probably don't want to start my, for instance, this nasolabial fold, this sort of thing that's tucked over our nose here. If it creates these sort of lines coming down, I don't want to place that here. Why not? Because that's not very anatomically plausible. It doesn't actually do that. it's called the nasolabial fold because it folds over the nose and it goes down like that. So these simple little things makes a big difference. Sometimes you see that's better. That's a better solution. It's more anatomically plausible. It's a little thing, but so you all had art with Fraser? You did some anatomy, right? A little bit. No? Not really? Was that? You watched each other. Anatomy lessons. Oh, that sounds fun. All right. So anyways, so this ties in beautifully, obviously, with any sort of art class or I don't know, these looking funky. So this is it. This is where you spend most of your time probably fleshing out the primary shapes. This is your basic design. What happened now? Everything. Oh, what did I say yesterday? If everything slows down and it seems you can't work, what probably happened? Well, no, not really. It should be able to, but it seems like it's starting to. Yeah, it could be dynamic subdivision. And sure enough, it's dynamic subdivision. So yeah, it's like pressing 3 in Maya, and here we have a lot of polys, so don't do that. So now it should be able to work again. Cool. So I'm just going to sculpt a little bit. So probably you spend more time in this primary stage. So if you're excited about, oh, let's go in there and ZBrush and add millions of polys and start getting some wrinkles happening, because that's what ZBrush is all about, then you're mistaken, because this is what ZBrush is all about. This is the Dynamesh feature really. This is the creature character workflow that's used everywhere now, because it's much quicker than traditional sculpting, and it's a whole lot quicker than doing a polygonal mesh in Maya and then adding some details afterwards. Do you have any questions? So all I'm doing, I'm using move and clay buildup. Let's make something really funky. I think you need some more of a forehead. Make something really. Oh, that's kind of nice. So now it's taken a different direction, trying things out. So just a couple of tools. Oh, and the Damien standard. So let's look at the back. Yeah. So we had the trapezius going down here, and that's what we were doing. Sort of this guy. And then lower trapezius. So you see already just like hinting at some musculature there underneath. Makes the difference. Yeah, so if you have any questions, just shout out. If not, I'm just going to keep sculpting. So I love ZBrush. It's a program that doesn't try to make me feel like I'm not technical enough. Like Maya, it's very daunting. Someone like me can feel like, oh, this is too technical. This is technical, but once you learn it, it feels like you're just sculpting. It all depends how detailed you want it to be, right? But for an idea, maybe this is it. For a quick, rough idea, and then I could like present it like this. Now I'm pressing Shift F to drop it. So if you're in a team or something and you're quickly trying to come up with, you can spend 20 minutes, hammer out a concept, and then iterate upon it. So that's the beauty of this. And so if you're in your team or with your art director, you say, well, why don't we try a different approach? So, you can iterate upon things just so quickly. So maybe more technical people will feel it, well, this is too artistic for me. So that's the other end of that coin. Is that can you even say that? No. But anyways, I think that's kind of an unhealthy approach to things, that distinction between artists and technicians, because for artists, you should really, or for whatever it is that you're doing, if you're a sculptor or if you're an animator, you should still learn some rigging. It would help to have an understanding of what it means. I've taken rigging, had like a year of rigging. My year of rigging was a horrible year, but I did it, and so we're doing like skin clusters, and it was horrible. And so that was before sort of, well, they were obviously doing muscle sims, but I was at Noman in LA, and our teacher had rigged Spider-Man, and he used a lot of skin clusters, like making clusters and then assigning them to a set of vertices and then doing everything manually, and it's horrible. It's really horrible, isn't it? Really horrible. But you should have an understanding. So for you maybe you're more technicians, if you're doing Python scripting or whatever it is that you're doing, if you have an understanding of the workflow in ZBrush, there are some nifty features in here that could be helpful also for technical direction. And you would have an understanding of things. And everyone should be doing art. And everything is creative. You can be very, very creative troubleshooting something technically. So to me, it's just this strange distinction because all of this is such a combination of technical stuff and art. There's a lot of technical hurdles for artists that you have to go through. All right, so let's fix this. So how does I think I want to make this more subtle. And then we could Google again in the front, but it's sort of the sternocleidomastoids, they attach here in the front, and then you have this little dip, and then you would probably have the collarbone go back here. It's more like a bike handle shape. And maybe we won't see this. It depends how fatty or but roughing it in and then taking it back down. So now I'm holding shift and I'm smoothing things out. So I'm just going to smooth things out. Here we're going to use Damien standard. Okay, so let's, I could sculpt airs, but let's cheat for the airs to just show you a feature. So we have some insert meshes. You shouldn't always be using insert meshes, obviously, but they're nice. B-I-N, no, B-I, and then you'll have all the insert meshes. And there's one called body parts. And if I hit, what is it? I don't, yeah, M. You can hit M. So I'm in the insert mesh brush, and I hit M, and I have all these body parts I can insert. Maybe we'll do it on this side, and then I can just drag things, and it will pop straight to the mesh. Oh, then we have to talk about the transpose tools. Okay, let's spend 5 minutes talking about the transpose tools. But anyways, I inserted this mesh using the insert mesh brush, and now it opened the transpose tool. So I'm not in draw, I'm in move. So I have move, scale, and rotate. If there is ZBrush 4R8 on the lab, right now we have actually normal manipulator handle, which we always wanted in ZBrush, and now we finally have it. But this version of ZBrush 4R7 doesn't have it. We only have the transpose tools. But let me show you how it works. You get this handle. You can draw the handle out. It is confusing, but you draw it out. And then there's this middle circle. You have to have your pen inside the middle circle, and then you can move it around. There's also this circle. And there's also this circle. You can, it's to extend it and drag it out. But if you put it in the middle, it will just move it around. Scale. And rotate. So rotate, you can, okay, so if I draw this out, you can rotate. If I start rotating from here, it will actually rotate based on this pivot. If I start from here, it will rotate based on this pivot. So if I rotate here, it will rotate around that. If I rotate here, it will rotate around that. If I want to rotate it around the y-axis, just around itself, I hold shift and I rotate around the middle. Why is it that complicated? I don't know. It kind of is. But anyways, so, but now we have a new, so that's nice, right? And then I can go do this control selection to the side. And if I do it again, it will merge it and it will become a part of the same Dynamesh. And then I can smooth out the transition. So now it's just a part of that same mesh as if it was always there. And I could have done that symmetrically, but I didn't. So, well, that brings up a point. Let me save this first. So, no. Questions? No questions? I wonder if mirror and weld, is that gonna, yeah, that's the other side of it, okay. There's deformation, smart resymmetry. So then I can, okay, so when you do control, okay, to recompute the Dynamesh, typically when you hold control, that's actually to activate something called the mask pen, is to make masks. So if I hold control and I start drawing on the surface, I'm making a mask. We haven't talked about masks yet. It has nothing to do with the Dynamesh, it just happens to be set on the same hotkey. But if I do this and I do selection marquee over half of it, I have disabled symmetry, so I'm pressing X to disable symmetry. So I'm basically telling ZBrush which part of this mesh I'm happy with, so that side, and then I can do a resymmetry. This, I don't think it's going to work. No. Smart resymmetry? Yeah, so it's not great. Yeah, screw that. It's for minor changes. It will do it. For larger changes, we do have this. I don't do this a lot, so that's why I'm not really. I don't know what I'm talking about. But we have this mirror and weld, and it will mirror it basically, but it's doing it on the other side. So if my error was over there, it should have copied it over. But anyways, so I'm in insert body parts, insert an error, pop it in there, boom. Oh, it's the wrong way. So then I can do scale. And no. How would I flip that around? Okay, so I know what to do. So when I placed it, actually, just ignore everything I'm doing now. This is boring. But I can, it actually makes it into two polygroups, so then I can split them. So I can do group split. And then I'll have that air separated. And then I can go here, and I can do C plugin, subtool master, mirror. Okay, and that will mirror that across. And then I can move them up, and then I can merge it back down. There's more that goes into this. We will have a look at merging things and projecting details when we start doing retopology. There's a lot of fun technical stuff in this course, so I hope you're excited. It will be fun. Okay, let's delete this. This is not undoable. That's okay, but OK is below the menu, so I can't press it. And I can't even press cancel. Nice. That's interesting. Can I? Yeah, luckily I could escape. Okay, so it seems it has to do with my strange monitor resolution, probably. Ah, come on. Just go away. Delete. No. Okay, there we go. So then, what happened? Okay, so now I can't even see that one. Okay, because I have no subtools right now. So now, okay, so everything's a part of the same, but then I still have to reconfigure the Dynamesh, and it will merge it to be a part of the same thing. And then I can smooth it out. And now it's symmetrical. And I can even activate my symmetry again, pressing X. Okay, so subtools, we briefly talked about it yesterday. So now I don't have any subtools because I don't have any other meshes. And you just saw me using the insert mesh brush, which would insert meshes directly onto the surface. And it just happened to be a perfectly modeled air, but I can also do something like a circle or a sphere. I mean, so BI and body parts, no, not body parts, BI, insert sphere, B. You insert a lot of spheres. So then I can just draw it on there, and if I hold Shift, it will keep it uniform. Whoops. There we go. There is another way of doing that, so you can go here and append, and then you can append a sphere. And then you'll get it as a subtool. And then I can use the transpose tools. And I can move it around. And I can go to scale and rotate. And I can scale it down. Holding, let's see, holding Shift and using the bottom one, I can do a uniform scale and scale it down. It takes much longer. And then I can move it into place using sort of one axis at a time, thinking about this. And then I'll have my eyeball in there. And there it is. And then I can go and do a C plugin subtool master mirror. And it will mirror it across the x-axis. And there it is. So again, so now this is here as a separate subtool. And if I'm on that subtool, I can only sculpt on it. So BCB, activate symmetry. And now I can sculpt on that one. Nice. Or select the head again, and I can keep sculpting on this one. Oops. So I need to figure out what's the hotkey for that dynamic subdiv because I keep hitting it. So you'll probably do the same, and you'll figure out that everything sort of lags and you can't do things. And it shouldn't be lagging in ZBrush because it just doesn't lag. But if it starts lagging, it's probably the dynamic subdivisions that you've enabled. I think I need to. So yeah, you're moving around, playing around with the dimensions. You have to be your own sort of art director in your head. And it's not too late to really change drastically the design because we're still in the primary stage. I can still do anything. So that's why it's worth spending time in this stage. This is to me the most this is the most vital part of the design, obviously. Establishing the silhouette. So it seems like I changed there we go. So if you wanted a clear read here, I can do Shift S and drop that to the canvas. Like that. Control N. So BPI is a pinch brush. BPI, I can pinch things together. If I exaggerate, it will really pinch it. But that was kind of interesting. Cool. So I made this funky mask all of a sudden. But no. BDS. Maybe it's going to be less. So that's totally different, but interesting. Oh, so the move brush, I can move it, just move it around like this. But if I hold Alt, I can move the, it's a very useful feature because I'm moving the mesh according to, I guess it's the normal. Yeah, so I can pull the mesh out according to the mesh normal. So I'm sort of pulling straight towards me by holding Alt and moving to the right. This is useful. So keep using the move brush a lot. That's cool. And let's get that air in place. So typically the top of the air, sort of where the eyebrows would be, right here. And the bottom would typically be more or less by the tip of the nose. So it would be the sort of the height of the air. And that varies. Some people have bigger or smaller ears. And this guy seems to have special ears. So you see that air I inserted, it's not really, I might as well have sculpted it. It doesn't really matter. But it probably helped for the speed of it. I just could insert that. But I'm still making this my air. It's not really, doesn't matter. Okay, so let's take a little break. So this, I'm probably going to just say this is it for the primary stage, more or less. Yeah, so let's meet back at 11. So let's say this is our first draft of the primary stage, and at this point I would sort of do this Shift S and really maybe go away, have a coffee, come back hour later, see what I think. Okay, because you really get blinded, and when I come back later or even the next day, maybe I'll do something else the rest of the day. Then I have a look at it tomorrow and I'll say, oh no, what was I thinking? Probably what you're thinking. So because you can't really see it yourselves. So that's why it's helpful if you need instant feedback. Just ask someone you trust in your class or team members on their opinion. So fresh set of eyes. But anyways, and then you could do a quick print screen of this even and do in Photoshop and go and see if you can't really try to analyze a little bit what isn't working. So yeah. So then, it's not this really harsh division. Okay, now we're done with this stage or whatever. But especially if you're working, that's sort of the traditional way of approaching it, and it kind of helps. There's also things like planar analysis that you would sort of think of the surfaces as planes. Maybe you've done that in art class when you're drawing, so that you're thinking in terms of geometrical shapes when you're building out. You can do the same thing in sculpting. So I'm not going to bother you with a lot of info on that. Maybe I'll post some references. There's also on the reading list, there's a book by Scott Spencer. I haven't read it because it's newer than the one I have. So, but I have another one by Scott Spencer. I just put the newest one up there because I figured it's probably better. But anyways, in the book I have, he what is it called even? I don't remember. He talks about planar analysis, but he's very okay. This is the one I have. It's getting old, but it's still valid. It's still very good. So if you want to read up on those topics, I would suggest. Well, it is on the reading list, so you can get a hold of his latest book. So I took a class with Scott back in the day. He was mostly doing card tricks during class, so it wasn't very instructional, but it was kind of fun. He's now called Madeline Spencer, and he works at Weta, or she works at Weta. So he kind of changed name and sex. So, but she's a great artist, so you should check her out. Anyways, so moving on. So next stage. Oh, there's dynamic there's a hotkey for that. I don't know what it is. I will Google it because it's starting to annoy me. And you'll probably do the same. And you'll feel I can't work. It's too clogged down. Then go in here, geometry, turn off the dynamic subdivision. So now for the next level of things, I will go in there and I'll click once and I'll up the resolution. So this is, again, like we said yesterday, an arbitrary number, but I'm just going to say 500. I don't even know. So, but I already saved it. So there we go. And now it's going to recompute, and it's going to give us a much higher poly count for the Dynamesh. Maybe that's too high. Seems like it. For dynamic? No, it can't be. Oh, when you're in Dynamesh, probably. Right. Or whatever, because, or if, okay, so the hotkey is D. Okay, I get it. So the hotkey is D if you don't have subdivision levels on your mesh. Yeah, because D is typically to go up in subdivision levels. Like we talked about yesterday, we were not in Dynamesh, but we subdivided. So we had like 8 different subdivision levels. So D is the hotkey to go up in subdivision levels or down in subdivision levels. Just shift D to toggle between the subdivision levels. So it's not initially the hotkey for dynamic subdivision because it's something else. But it might be the hotkey for it if you don't have subdivision levels. Which makes total sense because if you're working with dynamic subdivisions, it's like working in Maya when you're pressing number 3, right? It's like you're using creasing edges and things, and you wouldn't have subdivision levels. All right. You go from a holding polygonal cage, right, to a subdivided result. That's what this is. Okay. Anyways, but I'm not going to be using that. So it's just annoying. And I hit D, so that's what happens. Well, I can just try it, right? Yes. Thank you. Okay. So then, what's my poly count? Okay, so it's not so bad, 1.5 million. Well, I think that's good for the secondary. So a little thing here also, if you want to be honing in on this region, you can hold Control Shift and you can do this selection. And Control Shift click, it will deselect again. Oh no. Oh, hold on. Isn't it? Oh no. I should have prepared for this lecture more. There's a hotkey. Anyways, I thought it was okay. So now we have more definition. We can go in and sculpt. So now this is the secondary stage. You're just sort of really establishing all the forms. That looks funky. So you could have references of different parts, or not. Just have fun. Yeah, but it's not too late to change your mind about the proportions of things. So I'm using smooth a lot, but now the smooth brush has less of an effect because we have more polys to work with. So then I got to go, oh, actually it works pretty good. I'm going to tone it down. Typically if you have a lot of polys, the smooth brush is no longer so efficient. So Damien standard, I can carve straight in. Well, that's not doing a good job with it. I really don't like this sculpt right now. It's okay. So you gotta noodle away. I think I gotta recompute it, but I won't do it because it's gonna take too long. Maybe I'll do something like that. So move brush. Okay, but yeah, so you get the idea. This is going over, really refining all the shapes, and we have more polys to work with, so we can be more. The point is not overworking it too early. So in the primary stage, you want to set your the Dynamesh to a low resolution, so any like 60 to 100 typically is what I do. But then for this, we need more. But if you start out at this level, it's very difficult to work because now already the mesh is pretty heavy, right? So try to force yourself to stay at a lower subdivision level for longer is typically what I would suggest. And then I would obviously have spent more time. I would not have gone to this level yet, but that's fine. See, how far can you really push it? So when you're looking at it at a distance, in the primary stage, you're done. You know, the character is sort of done in the primary stage. You can, that's it. And then what we're doing now is just like building on top of that for refining all the shapes. So probably the eyes would need a lot more work. So this mesh is clunky. I would have to recompute it. Let me do it. Questions? Refining, refining, refining. And every now and then, you'll probably want to recompute the Dynamesh like this so that you will have an even polygon distribution again. Because when I'm sculpting, I'm messing up the polys a little bit. But this becomes less of an issue now. And in the tertiary stage, you don't even need Dynamesh. I'll do that. Yay. So I'm getting ready for Halloween, it looks like. This will be handy. Yes, just have fun with this for your assignment. Doesn't matter what you make. Something you want to make. Okay. So, but he's still very symmetrical. So part of the problem is that he's too symmetrical. So I'm going to turn off symmetry. So in a later stage, you would probably start introducing a little bit of asymmetry goes a long way. The more asymmetry you add, the more disturbing it's going to look. But just like a tiny hint of asymmetry goes a long way. And also maybe introducing some, like a little bit of a facial expression or a more exaggerated one. So maybe I'll make him more tired. So I'm nudging around using the move brush with a fairly low C intensity setting. Maybe the eyeballs are too big. So I'm moving them symmetrically, so they're going to move in on each other. Yeah, it's a little better. So that's already pretty different. There's another take on it. So it's not too late to be just experimenting. You know, it's not this like one then the other kind of a thing, but you get the idea. Think roughly first and try not to work with a too high a dense mesh, and then you're probably better off, and then you keep going. Okay, so in this stage, let me save this. I'm liking this direction a lot more. So when I have iterations on this. So if I weren't happy with the new direction this is taking, I would go back to number 3. But this is sort of my new iteration, so I'm saving it as its own version. And then I can go in and maybe just start laying down some wrinkles. And we could do some search, but I'm not, or some reference search, but I'm just going to rough in some of these. So for a conceptual sculpt, you don't really have to take it very far. It's up to you. Whoops. But adding a little bit of visual interest. So I'm just using, again, the Damian standard. So now I have a very low draw size, and the C intensity is set higher. The Damian standard, you see what it is just a brush, and it has this very pointy alpha, and it's set to C sub. So if you'd had the standard brush, and you use this alpha, and you set it to C sub, you would have the same. There might also be some customization done to the curve functions up here. I'm not sure. But that's how the brushes work. So this is just called the Damian standard. It's very quick, and I have this ready to go instead of having to always, obviously, customize the standard brush. And then just smooth things out. Also, we have the pinch brush I mentioned earlier. This is kind of nice because I can pinch, lower C intensity. Sometimes I can pinch these back together. So you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but it sort of makes for a more convincing look sometimes. And then I'll smooth things out. So you see, that's not a lot, but it helps. It helps. I think I'll smooth this out. So now I'm working asymmetrically. So we talked about yesterday, there is a feature for symmetry. So now my character is not 100% symmetrical. And it could be that it's actually more asymmetrical. So if it were something like that, a disturbing guy, I could still work symmetrically using something called posable symmetry. So ZBrush will try to recognize the main curves and features, and it will try to make sense of the symmetry. So when I'm sculpting on the eyebrows, it's going to try to do that. Maybe it's not going to work. Here we go. Symmetry result. So it's, yeah, let's see what happens. No, that did not work. Anyways, so that's, yeah. I don't know why that didn't happen. Yeah. Let's go back in time. Oh, it seems like it's going to crash. So probably the, oh, it didn't crash. But I'm not happy with this. So I'm going to go back in time. There we go. And then just delete history. What else? Well, So for the tertiary stage, which I probably wouldn't go too far with it here, like adding pores and adding more wrinkle patterns and all of that, just because the Dynamesh is not really helpful for it. But we have a lot of polys, so we can try it. So if I'm in the standard brush and I have a drag rectangular stroke or spray, we can try that. And then I have some sort of pattern that would be suitable for pores. You can find stuff online as well. So, but something like that. And then I set this to C sub. And I start introducing, this would be the tertiary stage when, and I'm making use of an alpha that's just helping me out so I don't have to go in there and spend a month doing all the pores. Maybe lower the C intensity. But if you want to, you can add some subtlety like that to your concept sculpt just quickly. So you see it sort of breaks up the highlights, especially. So that's kind of nice. Something like this. We also have more, if you go, there's a website called texturing textures XYZ or something. I'm sorry, I should have texturing XYZ. This is great. This can save a lot of time for tertiary details like that. So these are polarized photos of faces and cloth and nice things. So look at that. So if you really want to make a very, very high definition hero creature for your tertiary details, for your pores and your wrinkle patterns, this can save you a lot of time. Texturing XYZ. Very nice references. But I think we'll have to probably get back to that. I don't think I'm going to go over way more than this today. There's basically, we have one subtool. I could have added more. Well, let's just add like a quick something. Oops, go away. Maybe I'll show the extract if I had something here. But you just have to not worry about too much polygons and the technical things and just treat this more like a piece of clay and you just keep working with it. I think you'll find that it probably will look very when you start out working, it's difficult to keep things smooth. It's a little bit tricky, and one of the things that makes it tricky in the beginning when you start working, if you're working with a too high of a poly count, so really keep the poly count low in the Dynamesh. I think you're better off. So extract. See if that works. Does that work? That work? No, it's not going to work. It worked. And okay, so I have to hit accept. Yes. So what I just did, I used a masking brush. So I hit Control and I started painting directly onto the Dynamesh on the mesh. And then when you draw a mask like that using Control, afterwards you can hit Extract and it will extract a mesh based on these settings. So you have a thickness, and then you can just hit Accept. Now we have a mesh like that. And then clear the mask, Control, drag to the side, it will clear the mask. Now I can sculpt on this surface, or this mesh in here. So if he has a shirt, yay. So I could add a little bit of drapery, like just make it look like there's a BFO, a fold brush. And again, what it is, it's just a brush, but there's a setting here under transform, stroke. Under stroke, we have a stroke menu for further settings of the brush stroke. And we have something called lazy mouse. Lazy mouse is to average out the strokes I make. So you can see a little red line. So it makes my stroke smoother, basically. And there's a whole bunch of settings here, and we have to get back to that. But if I go over and I'm a little bit careful, and I can go like this, I can make some interesting little folds and try to make this look like cloth. So again, drapery, the way cloth folds form and things is also a topic that you could look into. But basically, you have to think about pressure points. Where is the cloth resting? So it's obviously here, this is a point of pressure, and then depending on the cloth, if it's what type of cloth, if it's a very fine cloth. But I'm just going to add some hints of folds, and it's pretty quickly, just okay. All right, and then for this, let's not talk about anything else. We could go over a lot of things, but I think this is just what you have to get started with. But just see if you can't, in your assignment, then add some subtools. So obviously for the eyes, you can add accessories, just simple things. You don't have to, but I think it would be interesting to see if you can do that. Maybe some accessories if you want to try that. You can even try some hard surface accessories if it's more of a sci-fi thing, or helmet, or go nuts. There's also more insert brushes. So BI, we have all these insert brushes. Insert, and then M, and we have these things. They're just pre-made meshes, but you can do, yeah. That's cool. And he also has something there. And I'm going to use the transpose tool and move it in his head. And then I'm going to go back. Oh, all right. So when you do that, if I hit Shift F, you'll see this is what I briefly talked about, but I didn't talk about. But there's something called polygroups, and it's just a way of ZBrush has a way of organizing meshes, even though it's technically just one subtool. You see, it's divided into different polygroups. So, and then we have a thing called split and group split, and it will split it into separate groups. All right. But for this, I think I'm just going to go back and do clay buildup. I'm going to be able to just make it look like it hurts. Oops. Okay, so now that way it would be nice to separate that out. Okay. Group split. Okay. So now it's separated it out, and I can sculpt. See, we have a lot of subtools now because even the errors I can put them back again, but I'm not going to bore you. But now the bolts are their separate groups, and I can make it look like this really hurts having that stuck up there. Maybe more with textures, maybe probably bleeding, but there could be a buildup of some. Let's make it look like. Oops. Okay. All right. So, which also explains his expression. Let's see, scale. Yeah, a lot of subtools. Or maybe, okay, all right. Let's actually talk for 10 minutes more, okay? And then there's the barbecue. It's fast approaching. Oh, 55. I worked a lot of iterations. Okay, there, fine. Now we're done. Perfect. So I didn't spend any time on the tertiary stage, but I showed you how you can quickly apply it using an alpha and the drag rectangular stroke. And if you want to do that, go ahead. But I think I would hold off with doing too much of that kind of detail until we do retopologizing and reprojecting. If there's anyone who's especially interested, I could quickly show how I would retopologize this right now automatically and bake the details down if some of you want to try it. Anyone? Any takers? You want to see it? Okay. All right. Okay, great. So then we're just going to cover that. So this is currently Dynamesh. It's nothing else but a mesh that has this Dynamesh feature enabled that we talked about. There's nothing magical about it. Well, it's great, but I can just, now it's not a Dynamesh. Now it's just a mesh. So then we're left with a normal mesh. Problem being that we only have one level of, there's no subdivision levels. It's just one huge mesh, 1.5 million, and it's difficult to work with. But it's great for adding tertiary details. Problem is, I can't go up and down. So if I want to make any other changes to the mesh, it's kind of difficult. So that's why, personally, this is as far as I probably would take it. Well, I can go in and sculpt a little bit more, but for a quick concept sculpt. But let's show you let's just get this is sort of a glance into the future because we'll be doing this in session 3, but if you want to get started with it now and just try it quickly, you can do it. So I'm going to just duplicate it. So now I have a copy of that mesh. So this one at the bottom is the one I'm going to now whoops. Oh, so yeah. This one is the one I'm going to retopologize. So there's a feature in ZBrush called C-remesher. It might now, is it called Q-remesher? Is that something else? I don't know. The latest release. But anyways, C-remesher. So we're going to be talking about this more in the session 3 and also how you can go and do some manual retopologizing in Maya and using both of these. But there are some brushes here called C-remesher. Well, there's one brush called C-remesh guide curves. So with this brush, what you can do is actually draw some simple lines to tell ZBrush what you'd like it to do. So in animation-friendly topology, what you want is just radial topology, so circular topology around the around the mouth, and circular topology around the eye sockets. And that's just because our musculature, our facial musculature, that's the way we have circular musculature around our eyes and mouth. So that makes for more animation, more realistic animation, more realistic deformations. And I like doing this for, also there's another purpose I like doing this at an early stage, not too early, but when I'm done with the secondary stage, I like doing this because it will give me a topology that's easier to sculpt with. So when I'm sculpting, when I do a stroke, it feels more natural because the polys are flowing with the curvature more. So the guide curves can be very rough. So you have to do your own experimentation. Some people like using more, some people like using less of them. But you don't necessarily have to use any because this, if you're making a final production mesh, yes. But if you're doing what I'm doing now, this is just going to analyze the curvature and it's going to do an automatic algorithm and it's just going to make new topology. So just click there. And there's other things you can do. You can paint by using polypaint and make parts of it more dense, so more polys in certain areas and less polys in other areas. And then you run the operation and see what it does. So that's very useful for full body retopology, where you want probably the rest of the body to be slightly less heavy, and then the face have more polys. Now you can really save a lot of production time, but it's not perfect yet. So typically, if you've been working, been working for months on a hero character, you would spend that extra couple of days doing that perfect topology. Whether even if you have to go in Maya and paint automatically using the quad draw tool, it's worth doing for a hero asset. But so anyway, so here Shift F, so you can see that's the automatic topology. And that's not horrible. We have it's following the curvature, and that's all I want when I'm sculpting. Because now I'm going to be able to go in here, and this is what I'm talking about. So when I'm sculpting, I'm making strokes, the curvature follows along nicely. There's one huge limitation with this, and that it used to be that it would make a lot of spirals, and we really don't want spirals. What that means is, for each of these edge loops, what we want are complete loops that just circles in on themselves. But it used to do all this spiraling. So we start here and we follow it, and it just goes spiraling inward. And it's this never-ending edge loop. We don't want that. So, oh, and the errors were not a part of the same mesh anymore, but that's okay. But I can't really see if it did it or not. So yeah. Anyways, so that's it. And then this is so great. So you just try it and you paint more guidelines and you hit that button and you see what it does. So you don't really have to overthink it. You just do it. And then I have a normal mesh, the benefit being that I can subdivide it up normally. So this time I'm not going to use Dynamesh. I'm just going to hit Control D to divide. So again, not using dynamic subdivision. Control D, Control D. So now we're having our usual subdivision levels. So now I'm again at, what is it, 1.5? Yeah, I'm at 1.5 polys, so that should be sufficiently, but obviously now I lost a lot of detail, so it seems like I lost all my work. But that's when we have to project the detail from the Dynamesh sculpt back down onto the newly retopologized mesh. So then I select the mesh I want to project to. That's the one I want selected, and the one I'm sampling from should be placed right above it in the subtool palette. And then I go down here, and there's something called project. Some settings here, distance, blah, 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 but we just project all and see what it does. Maybe we'll have to tweak it, but usually it does a good job. Now it should have had the errors a part of the same mesh before I remeshed it or retopologized it, but this is a quick process. You could do this in 5 minutes just when you're sculpting, and it will be easier to work with. Is it making sense? So look at that. And then I can just deselect. So what you're looking at there is my new mesh. It's not the Dynamesh. This is not a Dynamesh. This is a normal mesh, but it has all the details from the Dynamesh just baked down. And now this is what it looks like on the highest subdivision level of 1.5 million. And I can hit Shift D to toggle back down. And that's the huge benefit of now not having Dynamesh, because I'm done with it. I'm done with the sculpts. I'm done with the secondary details. Now what I'm doing is just I want tertiary details. And I personally really prefer this because, I don't know, it's just easier. Now if I want to be working on the highest, I go to the highest. And now I can start placing, you go to the standard brush, and I can still just start placing the pores, do whatever I want to do. Or do something nuts. Let's see. Like a wound. Yeah, that's just strange. And then, but have some scales or something. Well, that's nice. Yep. So just lower C sub. Okay. Delete undo history. So very unhealthy skin, very huge pores. The thickness of the pores would vary. They're not uniform, and they would also look different. Again, this texture reference is really great. So there's then you could also use that texture reference if you had one of those and try it with the uh, spotlight that I went over yesterday briefly, if you wanted to project down. But I think we'll have to get back to that. But now quickly for your concept sculpts, you can do this for your tertiary details. And I really like this. It seems to be much more responsive. And then I can still make changes. I can go back down to the lowest level, go to the move tool, and just be working on this very light, easy mesh if I still want to make some tweaks, which would be very, very difficult with the Dynamesh, because have to be working with that millions of polys to even make the slightest little tweaks. Is that making sense? Any questions? So now this, starts revealing itself. This would be the final production mesh. Well, not this. It's not perfect. It would have to be perfect. So I would go in here. Obviously, this doesn't make sense. So I would go in and do remeasure curves. Let's see if we can do one more final thing we'll do. Let's just do the remeasure guide curves and see if we can get a better result. So I'm going to, again, duplicate it. This is the one I'm going to retopologize. And then BZ, we have the remeasure guide curves. And I'll do, well, let's just see if we can concentrate here and see if we can get the mouth a little more successfully done. So I'll start drawing a circle, and I want radial circular topology around here. Like that? No, not like that. Let's start out here. And maybe we'll do one here. And then if we wanted to, we could do one like that, just to indicate that direction. But I don't think we'd need to, but we can do that. And then similarly for the eyes, and you can keep going. And then that's it. That's what you do. And then you go geometry, remeasure. And you see here, use polypaint. That's in ZBrush, if you hover over something and you press Control, you will have a tip. That's useful to know what it does. Press Control, and there you can see what it does. So if you paint with red, it says you want a higher polygon density. If you paint with blue, you want a lower polygon density. So the opacity of the color also has an impact. So that means if you were working on a full body, so I go to my standard brush, just turn off the alphas right now, and then go to RGB, and I'll select like a red. I don't know if the hue matters, but red, and then just RGB intensity lower, and then I'll start painting. And it seems like a bug. This is because there are no other, there's no polypaint data right now on this thing except for where I'm painting. So it floods everything except for this area. But then, like that, you can get rid of that. So here, this would be denser. Right, that's what that means. Anyways, only if you press this button. I'm not going to press it. So remeasure, it does it again. Yay. So, of course, all of these stages, just you need to apply time. I think the least interesting bit right now for you is doing this, the pores, like the tertiary details. Yeah, you shouldn't worry too much about that. Just start sculpting, see if you can hammer out some interesting silhouettes. See if you can really force yourself to work at a low resolution in the Dynamesh. Don't go too high, because it would just be difficult to work with. Keep observing your sculpt at a distance when you work. Keep observing it at all different angles, sometimes from above, all sides. So it is like drawing in 3D, so you have to be everywhere at once. Keep tumbling around. So it's more about like getting used to working. Let's see if it did a better job with it. kind of. Not perfect. I would want more of a loop to go around here. So with some more tweaks, I could have done it probably, and I would have saved time, even though I had to do like, even if I had to do maybe 10 iterations with the C remesher to get it, it would still save me time than if I had to do it in Maya. So it's not perfect. It's probably going to get better, but it can really save time. In your sculpting workflow, when I'm doing this, it's not for the final perfect animation-friendly topology, but it still really helps because this is much better. This is a much better topology than what we're looking at with the Dynamesh, because the Dynamesh looks like this. And this is just straight poly, straight down. There's no real curvature, well, some, but it's kind of tricky. But it's also great for conceptual sculpting. But I would do this at some point. What else? Well, that was the previous one. This is the new one. The eyes, not the airs, should be a part of the same mesh, obviously. That was just a mistake. And then you can play around with lights. Let me spend, no, you have to go, right? You have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes? You have 5 minutes. Let's spend 5 minutes, and then you go and you get some coffee and you get the barbecue and you'll be happy again. But there's a light feature. You can change the light direction, and it's very important because if you never change the light, okay, all we're seeing is light and shadow. Light is everything. If you never change the light, you're always observing this model in the same light conditions, and that's something which would never happen unless it's a permanent exhibition somewhere, like where the David is inside of a. But it's still, anyways, blah, blah, blah. So change the light. Do this. Go in here. Click around. What does it look like? Oh, change it. Change it up sometimes. But especially for your presentation renders, that's what I'm going to spend now 5 minutes talking about. And we're going to do it very quickly. And I should have had half an hour, but it's okay. So we'll do, okay. There's a great thing called KeyShot, which we don't have. But I hope we'll get it. If we get it, that would be nice. Then we could click here, external render, KeyShot, and literally click there, and it would send it over to KeyShot automatically. It's beautiful. And it's a great way to render concept art. Because this internal renderer in ZBrush is not too great. But that's why they've collaborated with KeyShot. So whether or not we get it on the lab, I highly recommend KeyShot if you want to be doing more concept art. You can make beautiful artwork much quicker. Has anyone tried it? Who has tried KeyShot? No one? One? Luai tried it. Yeah, I've seen, you've done great work. But there is another way, which is also really nice. We could make use of the, where is it? Isn't it here? No, it's probably not here. It's under render, right? Render. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, there we go. So I'm going to dock the render menu. So it's called BPR render pass. This is kind of nice. So you can change the light. Let me quickly do this. So I'll make a render, BPR, it's best preview render. You can change the options here. You can go in and look at this. It kind of makes sense. I'm just going to leave it up to you. I'm going to do this very quickly. So we get a shaded version. We get a mask. We get a depth pass. And this, what's this? Shadow map. Oh, shadow map. Okay, but it doesn't give us only diffuse? No. Okay, that's okay. Anyways, and then how do I actually quickly get these out of here? I guess I have to click. So BPR, that's that one, and then I can do the mask. And then I can do the shadow. And then this is a nice trick. I can change the light conditions. So let's do one straight ahead. I'll do a BPR again. I'll export this one. So this is BPR render 2. And that's all we need for that. And then I'll do, maybe we'll do a rim light back here. Come on. So to push the light in the back, you click out there in the gray area, and then you can have a rim light. And then we have a rim light, and I can export that. So this is BPR render 3. I could have also named these, so this would be my rim light. Doesn't matter. And then, yeah. Okay, so then, fast forward. I'm not going to do it now because you're bored, but I would have spent time making these passes. So this is what you can take away from this is that, oh, I can also change the material. For instance, I can do a reflective map. What happened? And then it's going to crash. Okay, that's fine. Go away. So, yeah. But if you could have made like a reflective material, and that would have been like your specular layer. It would have been just reflective, but you could have used that in Photoshop, and that would have been your highlight. You know, where you needed more specularity for the eyes. If it's like for the teeth, didn't have teeth, but if you had it. And then just let me show you then what I mean, because then you can take these into Photoshop. And now we got to go to the barbecue, I do realize, but let me see, the render, open. Just quickly then, okay, so actually, I'll post something from the ZBrush Summit a couple of years ago. There's an artist that really good at this. But here, so we got render 3. Okay, so now I can treat these as render passes. Let's see, come on. Where are my layers? So there I have my rim light, so I don't need that one. And then this would be sort of a fill light. And then I could just do multiply, or no, sorry, screen rate. Or overlay? No, what is it? Screen. It's screen. Oh, it's add, linear dodge. That's what Photoshop calls add. I can add it or screen it. So this is literally just adding that light source on. So you see I have a way of controlling the light sources in post. This is like compositing, but I'm doing simple compositing using Photoshop. And then this would be, I can set this to add and lower this. So this is a fill light. So this becomes a very powerful way to work. And then where's my mask? This would be, so quickly, if I were to screen that on top, or sorry, this would be multiply, sorry. Yeah. So then that would be just masking out. Or actually, this would have to be in my alpha for this. Yeah, never mind. Anyways, so yes, you get the idea. Hopefully, I'll post some info on how you can go about doing that. But you can make some slightly more convincing concept renders for your presentations. It's worth that extra little step to do a little bit of comp work and just throw out some passes. And you can be really creative with those render passes. And so the BPR render passes are really great. There's a lot of concept art that still uses this workflow. So you should get into the habit, go to the ZBrush Central gallery and read if there's an artwork you like, how do they do it? You know, what was the render? Was it keyshot? No, actually render passes. You can find a lot of interesting work. Final questions before the barbecue? Pressing issues? Okay. So you do have to, I hope it's very clear, you have to get on board with ZBrush. You have to get started right away. So don't wait, just get started with it. All right. Thanks.